In this video, we are going to understand a few concepts of network programming using Python. So we all know what is the importance of network and what a network can do. So whenever we want to communicate with another devices over internet, then we are going to take the help of network. So in this video, we are going to understand few topics. They are like sockets. What is a socket, what is the importance of a socket, and how we are going to create a socket. And also we are going to understand how many types of sockets we have. And also we are going to talk about Python socket module. What is the module which we are going to use in Python for implementing networks. And also we are going to talk about some object methods which are being used for socket programming. And then we are going to have some application examples. First example will be on the Echo server, then we'll talk about a sniffer, and then we'll be having a very good example how we are going to transfer a file from one device to another device. So these are the contents which we are going to understand in this video. So first of all, we'll talk about a socket. Uh, a socket can be treated as an endpoint of a network connection. So whenever I want to involve my device in the network, so the first and foremost thing we need to do is we need to create a socket. In other terms, I'll say it is been treated as an endpoint. And without creating an endpoint, we cannot communicate with the outside world. And also, whenever I want to communicate with another computer, we need to have an IP address which is been assigned by your OS onto your device. So whenever you start your OS, it by default is going to assign the IP address onto your computer. And also on the computer, we are going to have different applications executing in parallel. Suppose if I talk about the shell, suppose I say it is your OS, it is your OS. So we are going to have different applications executing on your OS. Different applications executing on your OS. So I say this is your so this is uh, your applications which are executing simultaneously, and all these applications are executing on your computer, which has been treated, which has been identified by your IP address. So things, all these things are identified by your IP address. Okay, so all these things are identified by your this computer is identified by your IP address, and within the computer we are going to have some applications executing simultaneously. So after identifying your computer, now I want to identify an application within the applications which are executing simultaneously. Suppose I say I want to communicate with this program or with this application. So this particular program is been identified by a number, okay, and we call that number as your port number. So we call that number as your port number. So we can simply say a port number is a value. A port number is an integer which is used for identifying a particular program which intend to send or receive the data from the internet. And each connection is maintained on both ends of a socket. So whenever I want to communicate the data between computers or any other electronic devices, both the devices in sequence, they need to be there, or we simply say that they need to maintain a socket, like they need to maintain the synchronization of transmitting the data between each other. And the socket API, okay, we have an API in the Python, okay, we call it as a socket API, where API stands for Application Programming Interface, which is used for sending and receiving the data without what you say any um, disturbances while sending the data. Okay, and also we are going to have programming languages, different programming languages have different modules, right, which are going to be used for sending the data from one computer to another computer. So with this information now, we are able to understand what exactly a socket is, okay, and how a socket is going to communicate with outside world. So now we'll see how many types of sockets we have. So generally we are going to have two types of sockets. And the first type of socket I call it as socket stream, and the second type of socket I call it as a socket diagram, which otherwise called as datagram. And when I use my stream sockets, okay, whenever I use my stream sockets, it means that we are going to implement or we are going to implement a connection oriented network between the computers. So whenever we say that we are using a connection oriented network, it means we are going to create a virtual circuit. A virtual circuit is created between the two devices who want to communicate. So there is a virtual circuit created over the internet, and the data transmission is done only through this virtual circuit only. Okay, and if we say that we are going to use a connection oriented network, then we are implementing a protocol called as TCP protocol, which stands for transmission, which is called as a transmission control protocol. And the advantage of connection oriented network or connection oriented protocol or socket streams is that whatever the data we send from the sender to the receiver will be sent in a sequential manner. Okay, so the advantage is that whatever the data or whatever the packet we send, whatever that packet we send is been sent in a sequential manner, and every packet is going to send an acknowledgement onto the sender. So whenever the packet is received by the receiver end is going to acknowledge the sender, saying that the packet is been received in a particular sequence. So that's the advantage we have if we use your TCP protocol. And the other type of protocol which we observe here is a datagram. And we say, and it is a connectionless network. It means that we are not going to create any virtual circuit, and we simply say that it is not going to follow one path. So the packet is going to be transmitted in many paths from the sender to the receiver. Means exactly it is not compulsory that we have only one path between the sender and the receiver. It may have multiple paths also. So if we use a UDP protocol, so the packet may choose any of the path to send the data from one end to another end. And if I use my datagrams, it means that we are using a protocol called a UDP protocol, which stands for user datagram protocol. And simply we say that these uh, datagram sockets are not reliable as compared to your socket streams, and the packets which are received on the receiving end will not be there, will not be gathered in a sequence. And also, the packets after receiving on the receiver end will not send any acknowledgement to the sender. And one advantage we have with a user datagram protocol is that it is fast when compared to the TCP protocol or a socket streaming protocol. That's the only advantage we have when I compare my user datagram protocol with your TCP protocol. And the other type of protocols we have is your raw sockets, where we are going to send the data from one device to another device, and it is being done between the native computers. It is being done between the native computers. It means native computers, it means that the sender should have the same environment. Suppose the sender is having the Unix environment, and the receiver also should have the same environment. So if the both of the communicators are having the similar type of environment, then we can utilize, or we can take the help of my uh, sockets called as raw sockets. So that's the advantage we have in my that's the advantage we have with my advantage of your raw sockets. Okay, so we have Unix here as well as Unix there. The sender and the receiver are going to have the similar um, environment, or simply we say that they are going to have the simple platforms when they are sending the data. But whereas if we use your TCP protocol, or if I use my UDP protocol, it is not compulsory that the sender and receiver are going to have the same platform or same environment. So altogether what we use is, or what we'll teach and understand is that we'll assume that the other computer which is going to receive the computer may or may not have the similar environment. So we use only your TCP protocol or the UDP protocol. That's the advantage we have if you use your sockets as socket streams and datagram streams. Right. Now in Python, if you come onto the Python for implementing the network programming, we are going to have a specialized module here called as a socket module. So we need the first and foremost thing we need to mm, use is we need to import that packet called socket, or we need to import that module called as a socket. And the socket module is going to have some functions in it. So we'll talk about those functions in brief and understand what are the arguments we have into that function, and also we'll understand the functionality of each and every function which is essential for your network programming. So the first and foremost method we use in socket programming is the socket method. So the socket is the first and foremost thing we are going to use, and the socket method is going to take three arguments. The first argument is called as a family. So the first argument we call it as a family, and the second argument is your type, and the third argument is your protocol. Okay. The family says whether I want to communicate using address family underscore inet. Okay. Or address, or address family, or uh, the address family of Bluetooth, or address family of infrared. So it means that we are going to specify to whom we are going to communicate. Okay, whether we are going to use, whether we are going to communicate over internet, whether we are communicating on the Bluetooth, or we are communicating or on some other items, or all those things we are going to say about the family. And coming to the type, we are going to specify whether we are going to use your TCP protocol or we use my UDP protocol. In another way, if I use my TCP, it means that it is in my socket stream. So the second argument specifies which type of protocol we are going to use for transmitting the data. So if I say TCP, it means that we are going to use your socket stream. And if I use your UDP, it means that we are going to use your datagram packets, where we'll say it is a connection oriented, we'll say it is a connectionless network. And the protocol, which is dependent on the type we use. So if I use my TCP, then simply I say IP proto, IP proto underscore TCP. If I use my TCP protocol, I'll be specifying this. If I use my UDP protocol, I simply say it is my IP proto underscore UDP protocol. So these are the arguments which we are going to supply whenever I want to use the method called socket. Okay, then. And see, and here we say the socket stream is default. So if you don't specify any argument, there it assumes that it has been treated as my socket stream only. So what it does actually, it whenever I call the method socket, it creates a socket object. It means that we are going to create an object for my socket. So from where we can interact with the outside world, we can send the data outside, we can receive the data outside. So all those things can be done only if we have a socket object. Okay. Then comes my socket get host name is a very interesting function which we are going to do it every time. So what it does is it returns a string containing host name of the machine. As we all know that I said in the beginning, whenever I start my computer, the computer is going to assign some name, or I say that name can also be called as my IP address. So whatever the IP address which is assigned to your computer can be acquired by using the method called as my socket host name, get host name. Okay. And also we can even manipulate, or we can even update that one. Okay. We can even update that one by saying we can even pass the host name, we can translate the host name to your IP address. We can even change the name, so we can even change the name, the IP address, all those things by passing an argument into this functionality. And also we are going to have one more function which is very interesting function called as a get host by address. So what it does, it translates IP address to host name. Okay. So the host name will be in the form of a string. Okay. So whenever I want to convert my host name as string into an IP address, or IP address into a string, then what we are going to do is we are going to use these two functionalities. Okay. So whenever I said a host name can be treated as will be in the form of a string. Okay. And I want to convert that string to an IP address. So then what I do now, we are going to perform an operation called as a get host by address. So these are some simple functionalities which we are going to use in your socket programming, which are a part of your socket module. Now we are going to talk about some other interesting functionalities now here. So the first and foremost thing we are going to do is a socket. So before entering into the socket, we need to understand the client server architecture. So I say I want to transmit the data from one end. I have a computer over here and I have a computer over here. Now I want to communicate between these computers. So whenever I want to communicate with this computer, the first and foremost thing is that there should be a connection between these two computers. So that connection can be a wireless connection or it may be a wired connection. Okay. So, and one of the computer, right? One of the computer which have the ability to serve another computer. We call them as server. A server is a computer which have an ability to serve another computers which are there over internet. It means that we need to make that computer in a such a way that we are going to build a computer over network in a such a way that it can have the ability to serve another computers which are there over internet. Okay, so now I say this is a computer, right, which have the ability to serve another computer. So now I call it as a server. And then the another computer I call it as a client. A client is a computer over internet which needs or which have the ability to interact with another computer and which is going to seek the data from another computer. It means that these clients are going to take the help. These clients, what they do is they are going to take the help of the servers. So whenever they want to perform some task or whenever they want to execute some operations, what they do is they are going to seek the help from the server for the data. So I say the servers are going to seek help. And sometimes these clients also have the ability to send the data to the server also. Okay. Okay. Means this client sometimes is going to help the server and the server also is going to help the client. It means that there will be a coordination or cooperation in between the server and the client. So if we have server and client connected with each other, which can communicate with each other, then this type of architecture I call it as a client server architecture. So we call it as a client server architecture. So now we'll see what are the functions, what are the specialized functions we have in the server and what are the specialized functions we have on the client. So first we go to my socket. So the socket we have the first and foremost method we are going to execute on the server is socket. So what it does, the socket method is going to build a socket object. Means socket object, whenever we say that we are having a socket object, it means that now your computer is uh, eligible to send or receive the data to another devices. Then coming to your bind method. So this bind method, what it does is it assigns your IP address onto the socket. We are creating an object onto the socket, right? And after creating an object, so what we are going to do is we are going to assign an IP address onto your socket so that another computers outside the world can interact with your computer. Then comes the method called listen. This listen is a very interesting method which specifies how many clients I can handle. As I said, I am a server, right? I can handle 5 clients, I can handle 10 clients, I can handle 100 clients, I can handle 1 million clients. So that specific number is denoted by this listen method. So this listen method contains a queue. It contains a queue which contains the list of all the clients which wants to interact with your server. Okay, and after the listen method, then we are going to have a method called as accept. So this accept method, whenever I execute this accept method, there is a connection established between the client and the server. Connection established between the client and the server means that there exists a virtual circuit between server and a client. Whenever I talk about a virtual circuit, it means I can send the data from the server to the client and client to the server. So that interactions can be done only after establishing the virtual circuit, which can be done only by calling or by executing the method called accept. Okay. Then we are going to have one method called receive. So receive is a method, right, which is going to receive the data from the client who are interacting with my server. And then I can even send the data, I can even send the data from my computer to another computer by using a method called send method. Now coming on to the client, to the other side. So another computer who is wants to interact with my server, I call it as my client, right? So I call it as a client. So the client also executes the method called socket, and the client wants to connect, right? So this what it does, this client wants to connect to my server. So whenever I execute connect here, the connection establishment is done. So if you can see here, the connection establishment is done between the client and server. And unless the appropriate establishment of connection is done, there is no interchange of data between the server and the client. Okay. So now after the connection establishment, now the server, the client is going to send the data, and the receiver is going to, the server is going to receive the data, and all the interactions are going to happen. And at the end, the client and the server are going to use a method called a close method, which is going to terminate the connection which has been established. So this is the architecture which we are going to follow if I use my TCP protocol. Okay, here coming. Now as I said, the method, some more methods. So we have the bind method, as I said, where we are going to specify the IP address, and also we are going to specify the port number. As we all know that port number is a unique value by which we are going to interact, by which we are going to identify the application onto which I want to interact, because we have many applications executing on your computer. Okay. So for identifying an application from different applications, we are going to use your port number. As you all know that listen is going to specify the wait queue, which is going to contain the information about the clients who wants to interact with your server, and then accept. As we all know that accept importance we understood. So for establishing the connection, we are going to use your accept. And also we have a connect which is being used by your client, and then we use my send method, and also we use my receive methods for sending the data, receiving the data. So this, while sending the data, whatever the data which we are going to send, as we all know that we are going to convert them into bytes. Okay. And then we are going to receive the data. When receiving the data, we are going to specify how many bytes of data I can receive from that end. So the maximum capacity buffer size specify maximum amount of size in bytes to be received at once. Okay. And then for closing the connection, simply we are going to use the method called a close method. So these are the interesting or the basic functionalities we use for establishing the connection between the server as well as your client. Now we'll talk about a simple example of my Echo server, because now we know what are the functionalities and all. So first and foremost thing what we are going to do is, the first and foremost thing what we are going to do is, I need to change the color so that you can, yeah. So the first and foremost thing, still I cannot see the color there. Can I see this color now? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So as we all know that we are going to import my socket, right? So we are having a socket here. So we are having a socket, and then we are going to have the host name, and we know the importance of that one, and we know the importance of the socket, right? And then yeah, so we have the importance of my socket. So we can have the host name there, and we are going to specify the port number, and then we are going to use my socket, right? So socket, as I said, it is going to take three arguments, right? So the first argument is specifies the family, and then the second argument specifies the type, and the third argument is an optional one, whether you don't give or give, it's of no use. If you specify it as a dgram, then we need to specify it as IP proto underscore UDP, otherwise there is no need of that. Then we are going to use the method called sbind, socket bind, where we are going to bind, or we are going to assign your IP address and port number to that application. Then in this case, I want to accept only one client, so I specify, say, so it takes only one client. Then uh, it accepts. Now we are going to accept the connection, okay, and then we are going to print the address, whatever the address which is been created, right? So we are going to create an address for that one. We are going to print that one, because we are accepting the connection, and the connection is going to say that the connection is going to have an address. So I want to know which address, so just I would like to print that one. Then we are going to have an infinite loop here, then where it is going to receive the data, right? And it is going to receive the data, and the size of that packet is 1024 if there is no data break. And this is a very simple program which is going to demonstrate how the echo server is going to work, right? Now, I want to send the data. Now I want to send the data. So for sending the data, again I say localhost, the host, the port number, the same port number which I gave in the server, it should be there on the client. And then, as I said, this family, then we are going to use the method called connect. Then I want to send hello world. Okay. Then we are going to receive the data. Okay. This is my server, right? So what I do now, this server is going to receive. It is going to send the data, as well as it is going to receive the data. So we are going to send the data, receive the data, and then we are going to print the data which has been received. So now I want to have a simple application for a sniffer. Sniffer means it is going to read the packets, right, of the network, right. So I want to know what are the packets which are being communicated between different ports. So just I can use this simple program, which is going to be called as a sniffer program. And now we are going to talk about a very simple, interesting program by which we are going to transmit a complete file. So the socket, as we all know, that's just we'll see that one. So my intention is that I am having a file in which we are having the data. Now I want to send the data from one computer to another computer. So whenever I want to send the data, first of all, we need to open that file, read the data from the file, and then whatever the data which is read on my computer should be sent to your client. So that's the task I am going to do now. So what I am doing now, we are going to read the file, and we are going to store that information into L, and then we are going to send the data which is there into L using my send command. Okay, and then after completion of my work, right, after sending all the lines which are there in the file, okay, then we'll say the finished sending. It is about sending the file. And coming on to my receiving the file, the same thing vice versa is going to happen. So we are going to use my socket, localhost, port, and then we are going to open the file for the read mode, sorry, write mode. So whatever the data coming from the server is being stored into a file on the client, so that after uh, terminating your client, then we can open that file and see whether that file is being saved, the content is saved in your client or not. So now we are going to open that file, we are receiving the data and write the data, and at the end we are going to close this connection. So this is a very simple application by which we are going to send the data from the file to the client. So with this, we are going to conclude this video, and in future, we expect more kind of videos which encourage you people for giving you the interest in developing the code. Thank you. Concepts of TCP. Now we are going to understand the concepts of UDP socket programming also now. So first what we'll do is we'll understand the methods which we use in UDP socket programming of the client, and then we'll move to the server. And all these things, as we said earlier, we are going to take an example of it, and then we are able to understand the concept. Okay. So now, what is the first step we do is we are going to import the socket module into your Python program, or sometimes we can even call it as your library. And then we are going to give the server name, okay, uh, which can also be called as your host name, okay, where it is going to contain your IP address of your server, and then we are going to specify the port number. So in my example, the port number is around 12,000. It can be of your own number, but that number should be a 4-digit number. Okay. Now, as we all know that unless until we create a socket, we cannot communicate with the outside world. So we use the method socket. So I say socket dot socket, and the arguments which we are going to supply into it is your address family of INET. And I said before it should be your socket diagram. Okay, so that should be your socket diagram. Okay, so whenever you implement your UDP protocol, what the option should be is socket datagram. Then we are going to take the input from the standard input device, and I want to accept the data. So I just use the method called raw input, and then we are going to enter the data, and whatever the data entered here will be stored here. Now whatever the data which has been entered by the standard input device, now I want to send into the server. Okay, so where is my socket now? So the socket, okay, so what we are going to do now, we are going to send the socket where I want to send the data onto the server. So which is the server now? This host name is been treated as my server and the server port. Okay, so we are going to send this message. Okay, and we are going to send this message from this socket onto the server. Okay, and then if you want to receive the information, okay, now I want to attach my server port number to the message sent into the packet, right? So now what I want to do is now I want to attach the server name port to the message which I want to send. So what I do here, just I will be sending server address is equal to client socket dot receive from. Okay, so this what happens if I use this method is it is going to attach the server name, uh, the port number to the message which we are going to send, and then we are going to close my socket. So this is a very simple program which is going to explain you how you are going to create a UDP client by which we can communicate with your server. Now we'll talk about the server now. So coming on to the server, the first step is a common step, okay, and the port number should be similar. So whatever the port number I used in the client should be in the server, or server should be in the client. Okay. and obviously there should not be any mismatch. So whatever the address family we are following there, and it should be here, and we are going to bind the server. Okay, so whatever the host address we are going to give, right? So we need to bind that one. So I will be using now bind method onto the port number as well as my server, as well as my host. So it is not given here, but you need to understand that, okay, now we are going to bind with your IP address as well as your port number. And now we are going to have my infinite loop where we are going to receive the data, from where we are going to receive the data, okay, from the server socket, and then we are going to send the data here, and then we are going to send the data onto the client. It means that now these instructions are going to communicate with your client and the server, right? So the server is going to interact with your client, and the client is going to interact with my client, with my server, and all those interactions are being done. Okay. Now, so these are the examples of my UDP client as well as UDP server. Now, I think now you got an idea how we are going to design the applications for your TCP server client and UDP server, uh, UDP server client. Hope you all understood this video. Uh, Thank you.